Hello, welcome to week 3. We got through our first, I think, realization of how the course is going to work, and I think a lot of you are doing just fine. Anyone who's having any difficulty, realize there's really almost no penalty for not getting things right in the course, I would say. I hope. It's a safe space to explore and to learn quickly, but that does mean participation is going to be iterative, meaning you'll have to probably participate 2 or 3 times in a given week to get feedback if you're unsure. So please take advantage of that. I'm constantly monitoring. Um, so, that being said, good job, everybody. And now we get into what we call the tricky part. But I do want to reiterate if anyone is not reading this, I did go to some level of effort to make sure that there's a lot of resources here in our module. I understand, I don't know why we kind of settled on this, pardon me, expanding and collapsing thing. I might remove that actually, but again, meta. There's a lot of meta things about this class. But I do indeed try to help out with all sorts of ways to get data. So right now, I would say all of you have a pretty good starting point. It's fine. But this week is about really building it out and having something actually to show someone else. So getting data is just about this. It's about getting something that might be a series of images or something like that into a table. And also don't forget that if you don't like the scraping thing, well, let me just unpack that for a minute. Scraping is interesting. You just learned, hey, the internet is really just a bunch of data on a page. Whether or not a human is there to read it is, secondary. So I actually work in my job keeping people from scraping our data because they can do something with it more clever perhaps than we could. So data is just out there everywhere. Everything is really just a database. And Airtable is there to help you realize what's the difference between a spreadsheet and a database. Well, Airtable is a database. Brilliant concept. It looks like it's a spreadsheet, but it actually isn't. So that's a little bit more detail than you probably need. But we're getting ready to turn in assignment 1, which is going to be your pattern assignment, which is a database that you have built up to be as meaningful as you can get. So make sure you go to the assignment page, read this stuff carefully. I'd say I understand reading something and understanding it are two different things, but do so and then also give me feedback. This has been revised. I hope it's very clear. This is, to me, the most challenging part for many of the course is to get some data. But I think you'll find out it'll pay off later because the data is, in fact, the limitation of everything that we're trying to do is limited by the data that we have. So going over here, guess what? Well, if there's any data source that's pretty much infinite, it is Twitter. So I wanted you to play with Twitter, and I think a lot of you got the concept of what do all these fields mean, right? So there's certainly the tweet itself, but these are all actual parts of the data model, which is what we are cheating right now to understand what is the data model that we can grab from somebody rather than have to learn how to make data models. Sidebar, if you want to learn data modeling, that is a course that you should take. It's really pretty useful as it goes by. But we're cheating by trying to steal our data model from someplace else. And you can see here is another example of a data model. And a data model is a bunch of stuff. It's again not terribly interesting until we get to this week, which is trying to read it and understand it. So hopefully you did get something out of exploring Twitter. Huge database, probably everything in the world is in there, but making sense of it is challenging. So you need sometimes this data, all these data pieces to make something like I kind of showing here a track in iTunes. And here's all the data fields needed to kind of actually make it make sense and make sense as you try to build a more human friendly way of exploring. But this week we don't have to worry about humans. We're still just in the world of data. So right now, I would say if I could just explore one of these, one thing you want to start with is we've got rows and columns. So columns, let's try to assume, and this will be a little bit of a challenge, that you have millions of rows of data. Now, the reason why that's hard to imagine is that you probably started with, here's a good one, top 10 somethings, right? Or place, let's say, apartments in New York City. Well, first of all, see if you can imagine apartments anywhere, and then maybe imagine that it's not an apartment. Look at your data and see what data is specifically only relevant to an apartment. And that's where the pattern matching will come in, because you're going to need data that you can actually kind of read and understand in your table format. And that's the goal of assignment one. So as you begin to build out more fields, you can try to copy examples out there. Basically, you're just building up examples of the data set itself. I'll say we're only going to probably end up using maybe 3 records as an example, but try to imagine there's an infinite amount, and what are the values that are inherent in the table that are interesting. So, for example, right now you might have a URL, which it looks like you can click on it. I delete all of those. To be quite honest, they're not helpful. They came from the site that you got it from, maybe, or if it's a part of the Airtable examples, they actually split their table into many different tables. We just want one flat table. A flat table meaning there's no joining to other databases, just to make things easier on ourselves. We don't need to make things complicated. So that's why if you are having trouble, look in the templates area of Airtable, tons of examples, but you're going to own it from this point. You're going to work with it, and you're going to share it, and you're going to get feedback. So that's the goal of this week to get us to assignment one, is a table of data that has actually some patterns in it. So as we go into week 3, you'll try to find, there's a lot of exercises here. Let's see, where are we? Week 3. There's exercises, whoops, where are we? 3, there we go. There's just exercises to try to look for hierarchy, look for interesting words. The things that aren't interesting tend to be numbers, unless you really know what those numbers are. So just be careful of things like numbers. Dates are super interesting, but what do they mean? Is it date created of this record? Well, that's not that interesting, but let's say date of publication is an interesting field. So you're going to explore, you're going to have some ups and downs. My hope is share your ideas early, get feedback early. That's the way the course works. And good luck with week 3 and assignment 1, or project 1. Cheers.